All right, so this is going to be Daniel number one. This topic of this first part of the playlist is going to be on the rapture, the night, and the feast of Israel. Now, in this video, I'm not going to discuss the Feast of Tabernacles. I'm not discussing that because that has some unique issues that I can't address until later. So for now, the stuff we're going to discuss is on rapture types, okay? And we're going to discuss the feasts, particularly the Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the Feast of Weeks, which is the most neglected one, okay? Why is it neglected? Well, because people focus too much on Pentecost, but they don't actually understand what the feast is prophetically and why it shows up the way it does in Pentecost. So let's just keep it simple. I just want to give you some background information, okay? So right now we're in the last days. So as we get closer to the end, there are things about the Bible that should become more clear as time progresses because God is a God of progressive revelation. So there are details that older Bible teachers may have gotten correct, but they didn't push it as far for whatever particular reason. However, what you are starting to notice is that in a lot of Bible teachings from the IFB, a lot of them are starting to fall away and teach that the church will go to the tribulation. They teach what's called pre-wrath. It's like this, right? It's called pre-wrath. They say that, oh, you're gonna go through halfway into the tribulation. Well, you're gonna go up until the great tribulation, and then you get raptured in the middle of the tribulation, right? So a lot of the IUB guys are teaching that the church is gonna be right here, and then they're calling it a mid-trib rapture, and they're saying that the church is going to get taken out here, and then you have the last 3.5 years, right? Now, that's what a lot of people are teaching that now. Now, you know what a lot of people are also teaching? A lot of people are teaching that if it's a large body of people teach that if you aren't looking for Jesus Christ, you will not get taken at the rapture. It's called a split rapture theory. Now, I want you to understand something. Although false doctrine is bad, although heresies are definitely bad, God allows them for a reason because you are supposed to test what they're teaching and try to go around it and figure out why what they're teaching is wrong, why it's a heresy, right? So, um, so many people believe that if you're not looking for Jesus Christ, if you're not watching for him, that you're not going to get taken out at the rapture. Where are they getting that idea from? It's long been taught that every heresy is a truth misplaced. There is a large body of verses that do teach if somebody is not looking for Jesus Christ, they will miss the rapture. But those passages are not applied to the church age, right? So in this series, I will be demonstrating and analyzing every single one of those passages so you can actually see what those verses are talking about. But the fact of the matter is, so many people would not be starting to lean in that direction. So many people wouldn't start to teach that if there weren't verses that clearly say that, right? So a lot of the problem with the fundamentalists is that they can't understand what the text says, so they change it and say, well, that's not really what it says. And you're not very spiritual, brother, and this and that, right? One such idea is that they take verses about the tribulation and then they say that the church cannot know the day or the hour of the rapture, right? Now, you can't know right now, nobody knows the specific date of the rapture. But what is known is the start of the millennium. Now, there's no verse in the Bible that says you can't know when the church rapture is going to take place. And Paul says in 1 Thessalonians 5 about the day of the Lord, which is the second coming reference, that day of the Lord should come as a thief in the night. But he says, ye brethren are not in darkness, that day should overtake you. Because why? Because in verse 1 he says, you know so perfectly well the times and the seasons. So this idea that you can't know when the rapture is going to take place is super pious, fake spirituality. It's not in the Bible. Okay? It's not in the Bible. Now the problem is that so many of these idiots who don't know anything about prophecy are trying to date set, and the date setting is always based off of wrong theology. So they're so confused that what ends up happening is people say, well, you should stop date setting because look how many people keep getting it wrong. Now, I'm not talking about the loonies. I'm talking about people in our camp. Okay, so you have these situation where people don't want to touch this topic with a 10-foot pole because they don't want to be the next guy. Now, I will give you my theory on at the end of the playlist of the series about when the rapture of the church will take place, but it can't take place right now because there's two conditions that have not been fulfilled yet, on top of Hosea. Okay, so let's just break this down simple. Okay, rapture types. What is a type? Like I explained in my Abraham, I have a video, a basic video on this. A type is something in history that happened in the past that is a incomplete shadow of what's going to take place in the future. Okay, so Bible says that Abraham offered up his only begotten son, Isaac. Is Isaac Abraham's only begotten son? No, Isaac is not Abraham's only begotten son. He had another kid, Ishmael. But why did Hebrews say that he offered up his only begotten son? Well, because Abraham is a type of God the Father. Abraham's offering is a incomplete shadow. It's an incomplete version of what ultimately God was going to do. Now, why does this happen? This happens because human nature is the same. Human nature does not change. Okay, this fleshly body it's dumb. Okay, so but it's not just that. In regards to sins, people will often repeat the same sins of the past. So God gave you the Old Testament and he embarrassed like dozens of his saints to give you an example of people who've made those mistakes before you make that mistake, right? But because the devil is the God of this world and he's working in this world system, okay, uh, he's working through all these different men to try to bring about his one world government. Now, the thing is, uh, every one world government in the Bible has similar factors. It's the uniting of the nations, the disassembling of the races, that there's no distinction between races, the unification of languages. God is the one who put the languages. Well, the devil wants to have people united. So now what you're seeing is AI language translations. The devil's trying to blur that line and unite everybody, right? Now you see that in Tower of Babel. Okay, Tower of Babel is a type of what will take place. But the events of Tower of Babel are not 100% going to be exactly like what happens in the future. But what you're reading in Genesis 11 is a type, right? So what we're going to be discussing for the next little bit are rapture types, okay? Now this word rapture, the word is not used in the Bible. Go to 1 Thessalonians 4. This word is not used in the Bible. However, the concept is there, okay? So let's look at some details here. 1 Thessalonians 4. We're not going to read the whole passage, obviously. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. It says in verse 15, "For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that they which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not prevent them which are asleep. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds and meet the Lord in the air." So this is a rapture. Now the term rapture is from Latin, harpazo. It means to be caught up. Okay. So the word here does not say rapture, but a rapture is when something is being snatched, caught, seized by force. So what is God doing? He resurrects the dead and then he seizes the Christians, right? Now, another passage on this is 1 Corinthians 15. It says, "In the moment, they went twinkling of an eye at the sound of the trump," right? All that stuff. All right. But here's the problem, though. One of the major wrong teachings in the tribulation has to do with the rapture of the two witnesses. Now, the issue is that a rapture, so get this, please, a rapture is not a resurrection. A rapture does not have to accompany a resurrection. It's for this reason that people teach a post-trib rapture. But a rapture does not always accompany a resurrection. They are two different things. It just so happens that in our case, they're together. Okay? All right. Now, some rapture types. We're not going to talk about Moses. That's another complicated thing for later in the playlist. We're going to focus on two guys, Enoch and Elijah. So let's look at Enoch. Genesis chapter 5, verse 23. All the days of Enoch were 365 years, and Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. All right. Now, Enoch was taken by God. Now, I want you to understand something. Bible says flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. How did Enoch go to heaven? He did not go to paradise. Okay. So, the mystery. Okay. Very big, weird mystery. Hebrews 11. Hebrews 11 and verse 5. By faith, Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found, because God had translated him. What does translate mean? In Genesis, it said they took him. Well, translate means to carry something across. Like, for example, the transatlantic. See that? A translation is from one place to another place. So he was on earth. God took him across. Where? To heaven. Right? So Enoch is a type of what? Enoch is a type of the church. Why? He never dies. Now, I'm not going to really belabor this point too much because a lot of Bible believers are already super set in stone on this. But Enoch is a type of the church because Enoch has never died. See that? Now, here's another thing about Enoch. Another thing about Enoch is that Enoch was taken out of this world before the flood. So as a rapture type, you can't say, oh, we're going to go through the tribulation and then we'll get taken out mid-trib rapture. No. Enoch, as a type of the church, is taken out before the flood. The flood is a type of the Great Tribulation. Okay? See, why is that the case? Well, it's simple. Enoch is taken out before the flood. The time leading up to the flood is called what? The days of Noah. Okay? So you were not, he was not taken out mid-flood. Okay? He's pre-flood, pre-flood rapture. Okay? So we're gonna just, oh, and by the way, I want you to know something about Enoch's rapture. When he's taken out, there's still some time before the flood takes place. Interesting that is? That's going to be relevant detail in this series. So keep that in mind. So he's the type of a Christian that never dies. That Christian will still live to see the resurrection. But what about Elijah? Elijah. Go to 2 Kings. 2 Kings. I'm going very slow, and I'm reiterating a lot of details because there's so many moving parts to this that once I start getting deep, if you don't watch stuff in order, you're just going to be confused, right? So 2 Kings chapter 2. Now, what is the story of Elijah? Well, Elijah and Elisha is going to take his mantle, I guess. So we're right there here in 2 Kings. This is Elijah. And here, what is he a type of? Now, Elijah doesn't die. He will die in the future, but he hasn't died yet. But that's not the part I want to focus on. I want to focus on his rapture. Now, I want you to notice here, there's no resurrection here. He's raptured, but there's no resurrection. So they're not the same. You have to disconnect the two. Okay. 2 Kings chapter 2. Let's just read a little bit to get context again. Verse 9. And it came to pass when they were gone over, that Elijah said unto Elisha, ask what I shall do for thee, before I be taken away from thee. And Elisha said, I pray thee, let a double portion of thy spirit be upon me. And he said, thou hast asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if thou see me when I am taken from thee, it shall be so unto thee. Okay, it came to pass as they still went on and talked, behold, there appeared a chariot of fire, of horses of fire, and parted them both asunder. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. And Elisha saw it, and it cried, my father, and he saw him no more. Okay, what in the world is this a type of? You have any ideas? Well, if you go by every teaching right now by Clarence Larkin and Dr. Ruckman, great men of God, they did a lot for God. They cannot explain what this is a type of. I'll tell you what this is a type of. And as you go through the series, I'm going to demonstrate it to you more. This is a type of a Jewish tribulation saint. Now, I want you to notice something. In this story, Elisha is telling Elijah, can I get a double portion of your spirit? And Elijah says, well, that's a pretty hard thing. But look what he says in the verse. He says in verse 10, if thou see me when I am taken, it shall be so unto thee. So here you have a situation where there's two Jews, Elijah and Elisha. One is raptured, the other is left behind. The one who was supposed to be looking, his condition on receiving the Spirit, for the double portion of the Spirit, was to be looking for Elijah. Now, not every detail is going to match because it's a type. When you're dealing with types, you can't look for details that aren't there, but you also can't ignore the obvious connections. In this scenario, you have two Jews, once again, and one is left behind, one is taken up. The one who's left behind would receive the blessing, and his condition was to watch. To watch. So that he says in verse 10, if thou see me when I am taken from thee, it shall be so unto thee. Verse 12, and Elisha saw it and cried, my father, the chariot of Israel, the horsemen thereof. And he saw him no more. Why the weird phrasing in the text? Constantly. And to make it even more of a clear type, who is this ministry under? These guys. Well, his ministry is under Ahab. And what? Jezebel. Who is Jezebel a type of? Mystery Babylon. What does that make Ahab? A type of the Antichrist. So here you have two Jews who are under a woman who's basically the devil in the flesh, because that's what Jezebel is, and Ahab, the Antichrist, who makes a league with Mystery Babylon. That's exactly what happens in the story, right? Because it's a type. And what happens in the story? Well, you have these two saints, Jews. One is caught up, one is stuck down here. The one who's stuck down here had to watch to get the blessing. Now, what's that a type of? Well, if you go by every commentator right now, you don't know what it's a type of because they don't believe what I'm about to teach you. Okay? So what I'm going to propose in this series is that there is a special rapture in the tribulation period that takes place around the middle of the tribulation. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm not even going to call it a mid-trib rapture because it's not exactly in the middle of the tribulation. But we'll go more into that. But I'm going to propose a conditional rapture. What I'm going to propose is that there is a conditional rapture in the tribulation that is conditioned on Jewish saints watching for God, for Christ. Okay, and there is a unbelievably a large body of verses that seem to indicate this. All right, now before we can continue, we have the two types: Enoch, the type of the church, taken out pre-flood, and then Elijah and Elisha, where one Jew is up there, one gets stuck down here under a type of Antichrist, Mr. Babylon, right? All right. Now, let's go through another boo-boo. You say, what's the other boo-boo? The other boo-boo is come up hither. So now we're going to start transitioning into the feasts slowly. Like I said, I'm trying to go a little slow because there's a lot going on here. Okay. So I have my notes here on my table. I'm just flipping through them real quick. I have a lot of stuff to get through. Like I said, you better be looking at every verse. Revelation chapter 4. Revelation chapter 4. Now, the reason why I kept on insisting that you need to separate a rapture from a resurrection is because this come up hither term in the Bible, it shows up 3 times. We're going to go through every case. And the problem is that if you read a resurrection into a rapture, you're going to this is basically where the origin of the post-trib rapture comes from. That there's a rapture just before the second advent where everyone's taken out. But that's not that. By the way, I have made it clear already, I don't believe in a post-trib rapture. That no, honestly, from when I go through this series, you're gonna see that it's nowhere in the Bible. Okay, nowhere in the Bible. So, but the reason why they're getting an interpretation is because they're reading something from 1 Corinthians 15 into Revelation 14, and then they're reading Revelation 14 into Revelation 11, when the three passages have nothing to do with each other. Okay, so let's actually break this down one by one. Okay, Revelation chapter 4 and verse 1. And after this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven. The first voice which I was heard of the trumpet talking with me, which said, "Come up hither, I will show thee the things which must be hereafter." All right, there are three mentions of this term. Let's look at the three and let's analyze them correctly. Come up hither, right? Now, this come up hither shows up in Revelation chapter 4. By the way, this is going to be for open space for later. Revelation chapter 4 and verse 1. Now, what you have here is a type of the rapture of the church. In the beginning of the book of Revelation, you have the church, the church, the church, the church. Revelation chapter 4, John is taken up into heaven. There's a door in heaven. Revelation chapter 5 and verse 9, if you want to read it, it says, "And they sung a new song, saying, Thou art worthy to take the book and to open the seals thereof, for thou wast slain and hast redeemed us to God by thy people out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation, and has made us unto our God kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth." So you have the church is in Revelation chapter 1, 2, and 3, or rather 2 and 3. And then you have a type of the rapture where John is taken up into heaven, Revelation chapter 4, verse 1, because John is a type of the church. And then once you have that, you have the Christians in heaven in verse 9 and 10 in chapter 5, before the start of the tribulation period in Revelation 6. So evidently, this come up hither is a reference to a rapture. No doubt about it. This is the Christian rapture. This video is going to get crazy long if I just go through every single verse. I'm going to put them on the screen. Look up the verses, dude. Okay, I'm tired of people. They don't want to look up the verses. And then they're like, "Oh, you're teaching a Ruckmanite doctrine." Cut it out, man. Revelation chapter 11. Revelation chapter 11. Here's the next mention of come up hither. Come up hither. Revelation chapter 11. It's going to say in verse 12, "And they heard a great voice from heaven saying unto them, Come up hither. And they ascended up into heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them." Now, the traditional teaching here, and we're not going to go to all the details, I'm just trying to give you their arguments. The traditional teaching here is that this come up hither is at the end of the tribulation, the last 3.5 years, just before the second advent. That God's going to resurrect the dead, take them to heaven with Moses and Elijah, and they're going to come right back down in the second coming. That doesn't even sound like that makes sense, okay? And first of all, the text says they beheld them, the two witnesses. So this resurrection and rapture is unique to the two witnesses. It's not. This has nothing to do with a post-trib rapture. And as I go through the series, you will see. I'm going to show you the evidence. I'm going to go through their verses. Okay. Revelation chapter 11, verse 12 is a reference to the two witnesses. Doesn't say anywhere in the text that anyone else is resurrected but these two guys. And to begin with, the two witnesses are killed just after the beast rises from the dead. So why would God resurrect all these dead believers just before the second coming? There's a chronology issue here. Okay? So now I already know what some people are going to do. You're sowing doubt, brother. You're sowing doubt on great teachings. No, just read the Bible. It doesn't say that in the text. Okay? Revelation chapter 11, verse 12, the two witnesses. But then you have this weird, very strange verse. Go to Proverbs 25. Proverbs 25. Now, Ruckman taught that this is a reference to the rapture, but the problem is that Ruckman didn't actually explain how that's the case. No, I'm not slandering the guy, okay? I'm not slandering the guy. I'm criticizing his teachings, okay? Disagreement does not mean disrespect, okay? The reason why Ruckman taught that Proverbs 25:7 is a reference to a rapture is because he recognized that these two uses of the word, of the phrase come up hither, are related to a rapture. Now, the problem with Ruckman is that he read these three uses of come up hither into the order of the resurrection given in 1 Corinthians 15. But 1 Corinthians 15 is that's a different something else, okay? So I understand God works in patterns and numbers, but you can't superimpose every set of patterns together because you're going to make one mess, okay? In 1 Corinthians 15, you have a prophecy in verse 24. It says, and every man in his own order, Christ the first fruits, Old Testament saints, they that are at his coming, the rapture, and then the tribulation saints, and then come at the end, right? He read that into this. You can't do that because, like I told you, this one here is only unique to the two witnesses because the text says that. And then this right here, let's actually read what this is talking about. Proverbs 25, verse 7. For better it is that it be said unto thee, come up hither, than thou shalt be put in the presence of the prince whom thine eyes have seen. What in the world, where in the text is there a rapture here? Is there a rapture anywhere in the text? Well, actually there is. There is. It's just hidden. You say, what do you mean it's hidden? Let's start with the context of the proverb, and then let's see if we can find something in the New Testament that matches the contents of the proverb, right? It's going to say in verse 6, put not thyself in the presence of the king, and stand not in the place of great men, for better it is. So he's saying, don't put yourself in the presence of the king. Don't walk over here high and toity and mighty. It says, and stand not in the place of great men. Don't surround yourself first with all these great men, because it's better that it be said unto thee, come up hither, than thou should be put lower in the presence of the prince whom thine eyes have seen. He's saying that it's better to be told, come up hither. But we know that come up hither is a reference to the rapture. So somebody here, you're being admonished here in the text that it's better that you be told, come up hither, than you put yourself out there. Well, what's this talking about? Let's look at Luke 14. Luke 14. And keep your hand on Proverbs. We can compare, okay? Verse 7. And he put forth a parable to see those which were bidden. Bidden means to call. Somebody's being called. Okay? And they chose out the chief rooms, saying unto them, when thou art bidden, called, of any man to a wedding. Okay, these people being called are not being called to marry the bridegroom. They're being married, they're being bidden to the wedding. Okay? Sit not down in the highest room. Okay, compare this with Proverbs 25, okay? It says in verse 6, put not thy forth in the presence of the king, and stand not in the place of great men. When thou art bidden, Luke 14, of any man to a wedding, sit not down in the highest room, lest a man more honorable than thou be bidden of him. And he that bade thee, and come and say to thee, give this man place, and thou beginnest to take shame to the lowest room. That's what Proverbs 25 says. Verse 7, for better it is that it be said unto thee, come up hither, than thou shouldst put lower. Look at Luke 14. When thou art bidden, verse 10, or verse 9, give this man place, and thou begin to take shame to the lowest room. You see the connection here? Verse 10, but when thou art bidden, okay, when thou art bidden, watch this carefully, go and sit down in the lowest room, humble yourself, that when he that bade thee cometh, Jesus, he may say unto thee, friend, go up higher. What's that? Come up hither. You see what's going on? He's saying in this parable, don't sit down and put yourself among all the great guys in the highest room, because when somebody comes over, they're going to say, no, you go sit down there, because somebody more honorable than you might come and take your seat. But he's saying here, but when you are bidden to the wedding, this is not to be married. It's to a wedding feast. We'll develop that more if we go through the series. Okay? He says, sit down in the lowest room, humble yourself, so that when he comes, when Jesus comes, he says unto you, friend, come up hither, go up higher. You see that? And he, watch. Then it says, thou shalt worship in the presence of them that sit at meat with thee. They're sitting to eat. This is a wedding feast. This is not talking about a wedding to be married. Now it says here in the text that thou shalt have worship in the presence. Proverbs 25, verse 6. Put not thyself in the presence of the king. Don't roll up, right? Stand not in the place of great men, for better it is that it be said unto thee, come up hither, than thou should be put lower in the presence of the prince whom thine eyes have seen. Well, in this parable, what's the parable in 14 saying? It says in verse 10, friend, go up higher, then thou shalt have worship in the presence. Well, in Proverbs 25, somebody saw the prince and now they're being put lower because they didn't humble themselves. So this is a rapture. But the rapture here is conditioned on what? Humbling themselves. Looking for Christ. I'm going to give you more. I'm going to go to the feast in a moment. Right? So what you have here is a conditional rapture. Well, I'll just make the connection here. That's what this is talking about. This is not talking about the first fruits and the gleaning and the grapes. That's not talking about that. This is talking about somebody being invited to a wedding. And who is the somebody here? Israel. Israel is not going to get an audience with God because of how righteous and powerful they are. They got to humble themselves. You see that? So what is this putting down and exalting? Well, we'll develop this more as we go through the playlist. But I just want you to consider something. That when the presence of the prince in the tribulation, the Jews should have been looking for the rapture, but they missed it because they weren't. So what's going to happen when Jesus comes back at the second advent? It says, and they shall look upon me whom they've pierced. And what? And they shall mourn for him. See that? Why are they going to mourn for him? Well, because instead of meeting their king at the rapture and enjoying the wedding feast up in heaven, they now feel stupid because they're stuck down here on earth. They're stuck down here on earth to meet Christ the wrong way. They should have met him in glory. He should have said unto them, come up hither. But the Jews got arrogant and haughty, and they missed it. This is a rapture conditioned on watching, okay? So let's go to the feast of Israel. Now, I could stop right here, but I want to do everything decently and in order. So I have more verses on this, but I need to, like I said, I need to build it up and go slow, detail by detail. I already know most people are probably not even going to watch the whole video. So I'm just hoping that at least one person watched the whole video, right? Okay. The Feast of Israel. The Feast of Israel. We're going to start with the Passover. Go to Deuteronomy 16. Deuteronomy 16. Okay. Deuteronomy 16 and verse 16. 3 times in a year shall all thy males appear before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose, in the feast of unleavened bread, in the feast of weeks, in the feast of tabernacles. We're not going to discuss the tabernacles right now. Now, I know it doesn't say Passover there, but the feast of unleavened bread was kicked off because of the Passover. Okay? So let's do this. The Passover. What is the Passover? The Passover is on a fixed date every year. All right. So we're going to look at this. Let's go to Exodus. Yeah, Exodus 12. The Passover is on a fixed date every year. In fact, at the time of this recording, the Jews are on the Passover. But when this video uploads, it won't be that anymore, obviously. Exodus 12, verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month, the month of Abib, shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of the month, they shall take to every man a lamb according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for an house. Notice, it's in the month of Abib, which is like March, April, more April, right? And then it says on the 10th day, that's a specific day. So the Passover is not a feast that was you were guessing, okay? You knew when the Passover was going to take place, right? Now what happened is that when the Passover was done, that would kick off the rest of the 6 days of unleavened bread, the total 7 days. Now, I want you to notice something. So you have the Passover feast, and then the Passover follows the 6 more days of unleavened bread. Technically, it's 7. Modern Jews, they do 8 days. Everything's confusing now because they don't do their feast correctly. But the total amount of time is 7 days, and the reason for that is because Jewish nights, or rather Jewish days, begin at 6 p.m. So it's 6 p.m. on the Passover, and then it's the 6 p.m. on the following 6 days, adding 7 days, right? And if you want to get technical, I know it's technically 7, right? Now I want you to notice something. What is Jesus to you? Wasn't he crucified on the Passover? Right? He's the Passover lamb, right? The Lamb of God, which took away the sin of the world. Right? Okay. Well, go to 1 Corinthians chapter 5. 1 Corinthians 5. 1 Corinthians chapter 5. Okay? 1 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 6. Your glorying is not good. Know ye not that a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump? Right? Purge out therefore the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as ye, the Christian, are unleavened. Why are you unleavened, Christian? For even Christ, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. Therefore, let us keep the feast. Okay? Not with the old leaven, neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. Have you noticed that? So you have the Passover. Christ is crucified on the Passover, resurrected 3 days later. That's 6 p.m. That Saturday, and then he appears on Sunday. And then you have the 7 days of unleavened bread. Well, Christ is our Passover, and you are likened to unleavened bread. How many periods of the church age are there? There are 7 of them. So there's the Passover, 6 days of unleavened bread. Christ is our Passover, so that's 7 segments of the church age. Have you noticed that? So that's really interesting, isn't it? So a lot of people are like, you don't know when the church is going to get raptured. We may not know the specific year, although we know it's going to be soon. And I believe as we get closer, we'll know the exact time that it'll happen. But as of right now, which we'll go through it in the series. I can't do everything in one video. Every verse about the church rapture indicates that it will take place in the springtime, okay? And you can't have the rapture of the church be any other period in the year except for springtime, because the second coming, the Feast of Tabernacles, is in the fall. So little nuggets I'm giving you to tease you to maybe get you to watch the rest of the videos if you're one of these guys that's like a little too skeptical. But okay, this is the Passover. Let's look at the Feast of Weeks. Feast of Weeks. Go to Deuteronomy 16 and Leviticus 23. Okay. So what is the Feast of Weeks? Well, the Feast of Weeks in the Bible has a lot of names. It's called the Feast of Weeks, and I have some of them written down here. It's also called the Feast of Harvest. The Feast of Harvest. And then there's the actual day of the feast. And the actual day of the feast is going to be called the Day of Pentecost. The Day of Pentecost, right? But in the Old Testament, it's called the First Fruits. Day of First Fruits. All right. So now, why is it called Feast of Weeks? Well, and why is it called Pentecost? Well, Pentecost is the Greek word, meaning 50. But let's actually try to understand what's going on in this feast. Is it like the Passover at all? Let's see. Okay. Deuteronomy 16. Let's read the instructions of the feast, and let's see how it works. Deuteronomy 16 and verse 9. 7 weeks shalt thou number unto thee. Begin to number the 7 weeks from such time as thou beginnest to put the sickle to the corn. And thou shalt keep the feast of weeks unto the Lord thy God with a tribute of a freewill offering of thine hand, which thou shalt give unto the Lord thy God according as the Lord God hath blessed thee. Okay, so it says that there's a number, 49 days. It says 7 weeks, right? So that's 49 days from when they put the sickle to the corn. Sickle to the corn, what does that mean, right? Well, let's go to Leviticus 23. And let's read the specific instructions on how to perform this feast. It says in verse 9, and the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when ye be come unto the land which I give unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then shall ye bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest. And he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted for you. On the morrow, after the Sabbath, shall the priest wave it. Okay, so notice the problem with this feast. We're going to keep reading here. There's no date given on when the feast is to be performed. Okay? It doesn't say, like it says in the Passover, on the 10th day of the month of Abib, Nisan, right? It doesn't say that here. It says that they have to number. In Deuteronomy, it said number 49 days. But when do you start the countdown, right? Did you ever notice that? Watch it. It says in verse 12, that's honestly, a lot of the instructions are tedious and boring, but let's go to verse 15. And ye shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that ye brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. Even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath, ye shall number 50 days, and shall offer a meat offering unto the Lord. Okay, so let's just break this down, okay? Break it down. When the Jews went into the land, and they would reap the harvest, they had to take the first fruits of their harvest and bring it to the priest. That priest would wave the offering to God on the morrow after that Sabbath, so that's Sunday. Now, the problem with this is that they can't number the 7 Sabbaths for the day of first fruits until the first guy brings his harvest to the priest. Okay, but let me ask you a question. Did the harvest happen on the same day every year? No. How did they know when to start to number the 50 days to get to the day of first fruit, the day of Pentecost? They didn't know that. Do you know what that means? In order for them to know when to bring the offering to the priest, for him to wave the sheaf offering, they had to be watching. You see that? They had to watch. That's just, I really want to expound this so you understand. And I'm going to give you the cross reference for this. Leviticus 23, verse 10. When ye come into the land which I give unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof. How did they know when to reap it? They had to watch. Right? Then shall you bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest, and he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted for you. On the morrow after the Sabbath shall the priest shall wave it. Now look at Deuteronomy 16. Deuteronomy 16 is going to say in verse 10 or verse 9, 7 weeks thou shalt number Begin to number the 7 weeks from such time as thou beginnest to put the sickle to the corn. You see that? It's when they begin to, it's the harvest. So they would come into the harvest. They had to watch. When the first guy started harvesting his stuff, that's not when the countdown would start. The countdown would start when the first guy brought his offering to God in the temple. Now, why would God do it this way? Because God knows in the land of Israel, not everybody is going to bring his sheaf offering on the same Sunday. Okay? Maybe one guy was going to give it on a different day. But it just meant that when the priest received the offering from the person that week, he would bring it on the morrow after that Sabbath. God knows that not every single Jew in Israel can come to Judah to give the temple, the sacrifice offering. Okay? So God gives them how many days? 7 Sabbaths, 50 weeks for the whole house of Israel to come to the tabernacle or come to the temple and give the first fruits of their harvest. But not every area of Israel had to be harvested at the same time. So the first offering that was given on that Sabbath from the first person that gave it to the priest, that's when the countdown would begin. Okay? So how did they know for Pentecost when everything would take place? Because they had to be watching. Okay? Look at verse 15. And ye shall count unto you from the morrow now after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering. Well, if one guy lives near the tabernacle, of course he's going to give his harvest the same. He can get it to him that same week for the priest to offer on that Sunday, right? But if the guy is like far away, it's going to take him some time to get there. He has to harvest it, collect it, travel. So that's, and once again, that's why it's called the Feast of Weeks. It's many weeks, 7 weeks, to give God the Jews all this time to do this feast. And then the day of Pentecost, they would all get together and then they would do the feast, right? So the initial ripening of the fruits, the initial time that the Jews had to actually do this was different every year. It was different every year. That's why there's no set date given for this feast, but there is for the Passover and there is for the Feast of Tabernacles. Go to Acts. But look at Acts chapter 1. Here's a scenario where the Jews don't know when the Lord's going to come, although it's a type here, so it's the Holy Spirit. The body of Christ is unrevealed, so it's not there for now. Let's just pretend it's not there. This is a type. These are Jews waiting for their Lord to come, okay? It's on the time of Pentecost. And so what do they have to do? It says in verse 7, and he said unto them, is it not for you to know the times of the seasons which the Father hath put in his own power? Why? Why couldn't the Jews know? Why couldn't they know the time of the seasons? Verse 4, and being assembled together with them, commanded that they should not depart from Jerusalem, but wait for the promise of the Father. They had to be watching and waiting in type. So to reiterate, these are Jews who are waiting for their Lord to come in type. There's no church scenario. Pentecost is about to happen, but they had to watch and they had to wait. The timing of the Holy Spirit's coming was variable. It was not the same. Because this is the Feast of Weeks. And in that time, they had to watch and wait. It's a conditional rapture, conditioned on watching and waiting. Although in this case, like I said, this is, we're post-Acts, so this is talking about the church. But again, this is a type. It's not one for one, okay? A type doesn't have to be complete. Now, this is a very important detail. Very important detail. Now, let's go through one last topic. So we've gone through the rapture. We've gone through the feast that I want to cover. Let's go through the night. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. 1 Thessalonians 5. Okay. The night. What is the night? The night is going to be in this color. I'll put it in blue. Okay. So we're going to do it like this for now. Okay. Let's do this for now, and then we'll discuss this. The Bible likens the tribulation period to nighttime. Nighttime. Okay? Now, I want you to understand something. I'm not disrespecting Ruckman, but Ruckman taught that the church age is nighttime. That's wrong. That's wrong. The church age is not nighttime. Okay? His proof text for that is Mark 13. Stay on 1 Thessalonians 5. Go to Mark 13. How Ruckman messed this up so bad is beyond me. Mark 13. Mark 13, by the way, is a chapter on the tribulation period. I'm not sure why Ruckman would apply this to the church. It has nothing to do with the church. Mark 13, verse 34. For the Son of Man is as a taking of a far journey, who left his house and gave authority to his servants, and to every man his work, and commanded the porter to watch. 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 You understand? Watch ye therefore, for ye know not when the master of the house cometh, at even, midnight, cockcrowing, or in the morning, lest come suddenly he find you sleeping. And I say unto you all, watch. Okay, let's unpack this a little bit. First of all, why would anybody have to watch for the second coming? Let's use some common sense, guys. Why would anybody have to watch for the second coming? They don't have to watch for the second coming, the second advent. When Jesus comes down, if you weren't watching, what does it matter? The whole universe is going to explode when he comes down and destroys everything. What do you mean watch? He says, as the lightning goes from the east into the west, the sun shall be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, the powers of the heavens shall shake. What do I have to watch for? That's the first issue. Second issue, you know the date of the second advent, because if you're in the tribulation, what's going to happen? The abomination of desolation happens, which we'll go over that in the series. And the second you see the abomination of desolation take place, you know the exact date of the second coming, because the Holy Spirit tells you like 6 different times. You say, when did he tell me that? Okay. Stay on Mark. Go to Revelation. Chapter 11. Revelation chapter 11 and verse 2. But the court which is without the temple leave out and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles in the holy city, and they shall tread underfoot 42 months. 3.5 years. Here's another one. Revelation chapter 12 and verse 6. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared of God, that they should feed her 1,260 days. 3.5 years. Check it again. Verse 14, and the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a times and a half. 3.5 years. How many times the Holy Spirit has to tell you how long the last 3.5 years are? It's 3.5 years. So what do you mean I gotta watch? Why is Jesus telling somebody to watch? He says, you don't know when the Son of Man's gonna come. Even if I did, dude, what does it matter? He's gonna come in the second advent. You're going to know when he shows up, when you see the sky darkening and the moon not giving her light and the cataclysmic and the meteors and everything. What? No, because Mark 13 is not talking about this. This is talking about a rapture. This rapture that you have to watch. You have to watch for it. Okay? So any Bible-believing Jew in the tribulation, if he saw the abomination of desolation, he just says, oh, let me add that day, add 3.5 years, boom. I have the second advent. I have the day of the second advent, the day of the Lord. He doesn't have to watch. Come on, guys. So, Ruckman applied this to the church. He's confused. And to begin with, this whole chapter is the tribulation. So you got these stupid, super pious Christians. Verse 32. Mark 13:32, but of that day and hour knoweth no man, not the angels which are in heaven, neither the Son, but the Father. Take heed and watch ye pray. everybody says you can't know the day or the hour of the rapture of the church. And they're using this to prove that. Bible doesn't say that. This is a tribulation reference. Now it says here in verse 35, watch ye therefore, because the master comes at even, at midnight, cock crowing, or in the morning. There's something strange about this passage. You see, what's strange about the passage? Well, this passage is so unbelievably loaded. So I'm only going to touch on it a little bit, and then when we start going further in the playlist, I will give you more details. I'm going to give you a couple more verses to look at. We're going to close it out, and then I will pick up on this after later in the series, because this is too much right now. Okay. First of all, in Mark's account, he gives 4 watches. Now, what is a watch? Okay. In Jewish time, they don't measure it in the Old Testament. They go off Genesis. So their days begin with 6 p.m. So the evening watch is 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. called even. From 9 p.m. to 12 a.m. is the midnight watch. Then you have 12 a.m. to 3 a.m. is the morning, the cock crowing. And then you have 3 a.m. to 6 a.m., which is the morning. So right now, the church is daytime, not nighttime. Not nighttime. Before I show you that, please go to Luke 12. Notice what's strange about this account in Luke 12. In Luke 12, when he gives this account about the coming of the Lord, he says in verse 37, blessed are those servants whom the Lord, when he cometh, shall find watching. Oh, this is a loaded passage. I'm going to get into this in a later video on the series. Verily I say unto you, that he shall gird himself and make them sit down to meat, and he will come forth and serve them. And if he shall come, watch it, in the second watch, or come in the third watch. Second watch, midnight, or third watch, cock crowing. So Luke gives 2 watches, but look at Matthew. Look at Matthew 25. Matthew 25, it says in verse 5, while the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept, and at midnight there was a cry made, behold, the bridegroom cometh. So when does the bridegroom come? At midnight. Which means all those verses about watching cannot be talking about the second advent. It's talking about a conditional rapture on watching. Okay? Now, with this one video, I've already departed from all the traditional interpretation into like La La Land. But this is the Bible. Go to 1 Thessalonians now. 1 Thessalonians. So what you have is that Jesus, the church is daytime, then the night falls. I'm going to show you that in a minute. And then the sun comes up in the morning. Jesus, as the sun, comes up in the morning for the last day, where the sun stays up forever. See that? Okay. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 1. But of the times and seasons, brethren, have I no need that I write unto you, for yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord shall come as a thief in the night. This is talking about the tribulation, right? Verse 4, but ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that day should overtake you. Ye are not in darkness, that day should overtake you. Ye are children of the light, children of the day. We are not of the night. You're not of the night, because the night is the tribulation period. So you know what Isaiah 21 says? Watchmen, watchmen, what of the night? Okay, verse 5, we're not of the night, nor of darkness. Not of darkness. Okay, Genesis 24. Genesis 24 is another loaded chapter, but we're not going to go through too many details, but I want to show you something before I close it out here. Genesis 24. Here's Rebecca. Rebecca is a type of the church. How do you know she's a type of the church? Because Abraham, God the Father, Abraham, the type of God the Father, is married to Sarah. Sarah dies before Isaac and Rebekah show up. So that's a type of God putting away Sarah, God the Father putting away Sarah, his bride, to get Isaac, his son, a bride, a Gentile type of the church, right? Now, notice this. When Rebekah goes to get married to Isaac, verse 61, and Rebekah arose and her damsels, and they rode upon the camels and followed the man, and the servant took Rebekah and went his way. Verse 63, and Isaac went out to meditate in the field, and at eventide, when did Isaac, a type of Christ, go to marry Rebekah, to meet Rebekah? The church. At eventide, 6 p.m., prophetically. Which means that just as about the sun's about to go down, God will take the church and meet his Rebekah. Isaac will meet Rebekah at eventide, the evening watch. Now, we'll go more into this when I go through more of the playlist, because there's so much in this. Every verse I gave you today is so loaded, I can't go over it in this video. I have to break it down, okay? So let me just write this out for you now. Let me write this chart out for you now. I'm going to cut the video so that I don't waste your time watching me draw. All right, so this is the chart. Now, it's a little bad to see. It's a little hard to see right now, but when I go through the future videos, I'm going to make it like a giant version so you can see it better. But here's the church rapture at 6 p.m. because Rebekah's taken out at eventide. And then you have the 4 watches of the night. 6 p.m. here, 6 a.m. here. At even, at 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., that's the beginning of sorrows. Remember, we talked about it in the intro video that the beginning of sorrows is the period leading up to the Great Tribulation. It's the transition from church to Israel, right? How long is it? Don't worry about it right now. All right. Now, we saw that the coming of the Lord that they were told to watch is when? At midnight. So the conditional rapture can take any place between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. and 12 a.m. So how do they know when the bridegroom is going to come? They don't. They need to watch. Then after that takes place, you have the cock crowing, where you have Satan's advent. Satan's advent takes place at 3 a.m. in the morning. If I have that right in my notes. Or rather, well, it's more like 2 a.m. But it's more like 2 a.m. is when this takes place. So I'll put the morning watch. I'll have to make a bigger version of this chart. Sorry, guys. I don't have fancy cameras and special effects. So Satan shows up around like 2 p.m. And then that last morning watch is when he's going to get crushed by Jesus. So make the board available. Grace be to you all.